Hello and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm, and today I'm joined here today with Stubble McShave to talk about episode 5 of the Wheel of Time television series, Blood Calls Blood. How are you today, Stubble?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good as always. How are
Good.
you?
I'm glad. I am well. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. And I'm so excited to start talking about this episode. Um, and after last week's episode, which had so much intensity, I noticed a dramatic difference between last week's episode and this week's episode. Even the overall feeling of the episode was very different, wasn't it?
Yeah, was a much more somber tone, and I think the showrunner said that it's almost 4 movies. So you have the 8 episodes is almost 4 movies because the directors had 2 episodes each. So you had a different director for this, and maybe that's I don't know if it shows, but it was certainly a different episode than the last one.
It certainly was very different, and in the last episode, we were left off seeing Nynaeve, somewhat surprised by her use of tapping into the One Power, and I have a feeling that was probably the first time she's ever tapped into the One Power and gotten that type of, response back, and she did so many specific things, in this particular in that last scene where clearly she's healed people and impressed all of the Aes Sedai, as well as even Logain, who noticed how intense her abilities were, and she probably also shocked herself. But one thing that is kind of sad is that unfortunately, Corinne had already been killed, and the this episode, Blood Calls Blood, starts off in a very somber tone with what we're seeing is a funeral.
Yeah, the episode is bookended by 2 funerals, in very different in nature. What types of funerals there are, and yes, they start with a funeral, and we don't see all that many in the book series. We see a few, and they alluded to a little bit of that with the words that Moraine says as they are placing Karenni in the ground. I don't have it in my head right now, but it's the last embrace of the mother welcome you home. They use that. That's just a short version of the longer thing that they say in primarily the Borderlands, and so they paid homage to that line. I would like to see the whole thing, but maybe this is just the only thing we get from that. But it was much somber tone. It's they buried their enemies and together with their own, and yeah, it was and they placed them in a wheel symbol, which is I think they tried in the TV series. They tried to have the wheel symbol as much as possible, and yeah, so that's where they did. I guess that's why they did, because it's a sacred thing or something.
Yes, it certainly was in the shape of a wheel with spokes and the bodies. As sad as it is, the bodies kind of formed as spokes in the wheel in this configuration that they buried everyone. And it is kind of interesting to see them do this. And also, I happen to notice that uh, the warders seem to be focused on a lot more um, in this episode than previous episode, which they were actually focused on quite a bit. Of course, Corinne's warder is devastated by her loss. And, he just seems completely broken. And clearly he cared deeply for Corinne. And, this bond that they have was so strong, it almost feels like part of him died, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like the Karenni and Stepin they are not from the books. They are Karenni was in the prequel, but she's inserted as well as Stepin in the TV series, and I think it was to because I'll go back to the books because that's my
Yes.
reference point.
Yes, of course.
And there they think about and they talk a little about, you know, how it is for a warder to lose an Aes Sedai, that they get either they just stop wanting to live, or they get a berserker frenzy and try to uh, um, get revenge on whoever killed their Aes Sedai, and often they don't survive. But you are never really shown that in the books. In the TV series, you have to hammer home that point very effectively because you have so much less time to do that. So this whole episode more or less was constructed for the TV series just to hammer home these issues.
Well, they did a very good job in hammering it home because we got the message. Seeing this man prior to that, prior to Corinna's death, he was, vibrant and talking to Lan and, kind of cheering people up and just kind of enjoying the moment. And then his entire demeanor and attitude is completely different now after her death. So we do get that point. And funny enough, Nynaeve, who's going along with the ride now for all this, seems to be actually worried about him, Corinne's warder. And I think that that's quite a different turn because, in the previous episode, she proved that she did care for Moraine's warder.
Yeah.
Because when she found him, or not, she didn't find him, but let's just say when she realized that he was dying from an injury, that's when she tapped into the one power, which inevitably ended up healing many people. But primarily her goal was to save his life. And now here's another warder where she finds herself quite concerned about this gentleman. And, I think Nynaeve is getting accustomed to the idea that if with these changes in her life, one of the changes will be that she's going to have a warder in her life. Let's say if she chooses to go down this path. And it's very exciting to see her become more comfortable with that.
Yeah. And she's always been taking care of people and saving them from dangers. That's why she didn't like Moraine. She saw her as a potential threat. So she tries to save and protect people as much as possible. And she sees a possible future that she may have a warder eventually, but I don't think she's put it into who that will be and how, in what form it will take or anything like that. I just a vague thought so far, I guess. But I think she takes an interest in people who suffer and try to help them.
I think she does. And, to add to what you're saying, I think it's very interesting because, as we know, Nynaeve is a wisdom. And as a wisdom, traditionally, let's say in her town, wisdoms, lead a life where they don't have a relationship with anyone. And now what we're seeing is Nynaeve. It's almost as if it's been presented to her as an option, or presented to her in such a way that she is almost, I'd say, opening her eyes and being more possibly receptive to, even if she didn't have a warder. I could see her having a relationship now with someone. I'm not quite sure whether as a wisdom she will remain on her own, nor do I think she wants to remain on her own, because let's face it, these guys who are these warders are actually really nice guys. And I think once she's seeing this and seeing that there's a potential for a relationship that is so incredibly strong, and having that kind of support, I think that she's actually maybe starting to desire a relationship like this. This is my personal feeling about her. And I think that she's going through changes that, any person would go through normally. If she stayed at home, she wouldn't be having this experience, but it is kind of nice to see that she is growing. And I think she could benefit from it, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the character really, feels that way, but I have a feeling that she's the desire to have a bond like that is growing in her.
Yeah, I think for all the Two Rivers young people, they had their lives. They knew what they were going to do. They were going to marry someone from the village or someone close to them, and they knew what the future would be. And Nynaeve knew that she would grow old as a wisdom, and Egwene was maybe going in that direction as well. And everyone's future has opened up for them. They don't know what's in store for them anymore. All their plans are out the window.
Yes,
And
and I'm sorry, go ahead.
and Nynaeve certainly has. She probably didn't have any romantic ideas for her future or in any way, but I think she sees that as a possibility now.
She does, and we're going to talk a little bit more about her relationship with let's say the idea of having a warder and what's happening to her, and so as the episode progresses, there's a time jump where it says it's about 1 month later, and of course we see the party. Um, More or less, or all the parties are going to be at a different location in a month. But the most important thing is that we can see after a month in the distance, finally, this structure that we've been waiting for, the White Tower.
Yeah.
And, it feels like, although this has only been, let's say this is the 5th episode, it does feel like we've been waiting for so long for this moment to come. And it is very exciting to see the city and for the party to have reached there. And my question immediately is, and I know that it was a very intense moment when the Aes Sedai linked together and went ahead and performed, the gentling on Logain. My question, and I'm sure everybody is wondering, is will there sort of be hell to pay for taking this into their own hands by gentling Logain? What are your thoughts?
Well, since this is a departure from the books, in the books, spoiler for everyone reading the books, but in the books, Logain was not in a point of view really, unless just a little short point of view when he was in a cage and was taken through a city. But I think that because I reference the books because I know the books. In the books, everything happened off screen, and he was taken to the tower and was gentle, and everything went by the books. So this is new for me as well. But Tower law is very strict. They do things by the book, and so there will certainly be some kind of price to pay. I don't know what the price is right now, but it will be interesting to see because I don't think. I think that the Amelin is not pleased, and the Hall is probably not pleased as well with how this happened with Logain. They would want to have, because they have gentlemen before. We saw in the opening to the first episode, we saw Liandrin gentling a man without taking him to Travalon. He should have been taken there and stood trial for, and they would have gone through all the procedures before. But so it seems that Liandrin has done this a bunch of times, maybe other Reds as well. So, but I don't know what the consequences will be, but there will certainly be consequences of some kind.
And there's certainly a lot more to it, isn't there? It seems like Liandrin might have designs on several other things. She went ahead and curried favor with other Aes Sedai so that they wouldn't try to discourage her from performing the gentling, charm, let's say. And then at the end of last episode, it was almost as if everybody was pushed to the edge of performing it out of, necessity after being, but also her influence, them convincing her that, it would be very hard to bring him back to the White Tower, that, could they really make it after 1 whole month of struggling and trying to stop him from using this power? Could they do it?
Yeah,
and so
they had lost their strongest Aes Sedai as well. Karenni was dead, so they had lost their strongest. So would the others be able to hold him? I doubt it.
Yes, and on top of it, this is exactly something that I think, it's not that I don't think Leandrin is evil, but I do think that she is doing this for more reasons than just being able to perform the gentling charm. I think that she has her designs on other goals as well, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as we continue to talk about this episode. So, in one of the next scenes, we finally see Rand and Matt, and they're on foot, wandering, walking, and they too finally see in a distance the White Tower, but you can clearly see between the two of them that they're kind of, worn down from the road. And Matt is struggling, isn't he?
Yes, yes. And the thing I reacted to, which you probably didn't react to, but it was that at first I thought, wait a minute, the mountain is it on the wrong side of the river? Because the mountain should be on the west side of the river, and but who knows? Maybe they took a boat along the way and got off on the eastern shore or something. But you're right. Matt doesn't look all too well. He's and his clothes doesn't look as warm as Rand's. He seems to be chilling. He seems to be feeling miserable, and he's certainly reacting to the children that's running past him. And yeah, he doesn't look good.
Yes, and it is actually hard to see him like this. I think it's very interesting because we haven't spent that much time with Matt, but we certainly are feeling very sympathetic towards him, aren't we? He is suffering, and he clearly has an internal conflict that Rand is very aware of. And Rand feels that he has to be responsible for Matt. I mean, he grew up with him, and he feels that if there is any trouble with Matt, he's always going to be there for him. He did tell Rand that. And when the two gentlemen enter Tarvalon, they are very impressed with the city, and it is an impressive city, a beautiful looking place. They stop by an inn and just to clean up. And unfortunately, Rand is still speaking to Matt about this incident from a month ago where they stayed in the barn at this family's place, and Matt is convinced that he's the one who killed these family members.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he's convinced of it, but he's certainly telling himself that it was his fault, and it's been a month, so he's probably beating himself, with doubt about what he did, if he did. I don't think that he did, because the dagger has special properties when you kill someone with it, and we didn't see that with the dead people. But who knows? Maybe they changed that for the TV show. And I thought that this is the first city we see where there are people in it. We saw Shadalagoth earlier, but there were no people. And here we see our first city in the TV series. And I thought it was fairly well done. I thought it felt like as a huge city with a lot of people. Even if they have a limited budget, it seemed like they pulled off the sense of a big city, of a with a marketplace type of thing, and a lot of people moving about. And I don't know if you noticed that, but there was a familiar figure waiting outside where they were entering their inn. I won't say who it was, but we see him a few times in this. It's a
I see.
it's someone that we have seen earlier.
Interesting. And okay, I'll have to look again, but what I was going to say is that one other thing that Rand and Matt were talking about is, kind of getting back to the discussion about whether Rand was responsible for the death of that family. Rand, excuse me, whether Matt was responsible for the death of the family. Rand is convinced that it was the Fade that killed the family.
Yeah. Well, he can't think he knows Matt. Matt would never do such a thing, and he still thinks he's Matt at heart, and he doesn't know what's wrong with him, and he have to believe that Matt couldn't do such a thing. So I guess I'm sure Rand has his doubts because he's seen how Matt have changed, and maybe he did do it, but I can't feed that narrative in Matt. I have to say that he didn't do it, even if maybe he could have done it. But yeah, so Rand is a good friend. That's what he is.
He really is, and we do see that, and he kind of is pledged to be there with Matt, and so I want to talk about that a little bit later as well. And so the party arrives at, when I say the party, Moraine, Nynaeve, and the rest of the Aes Sedai and the warders arrive at the tower. And this is this really is the moment we've been waiting for. At least it feels like it's a climax in the story, just even getting to this tower. And funny enough, Moraine actually takes Nynaeve under her wing, even though she isn't officially her apprentice. Moraine warns Nynaeve that her presence will cause alarm or attention, and that there may be other Aes Sedai who will show interest in her and possibly want to manipulate Nynaeve. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we're introduced to the tower politics here. There's a lot of politics and backstabbing and things like that going on, and they want to have the stronger channels in their faction. Everyone wants that, and so there were many witnesses to her channeling performance in the last episode, and rumor spreads, and there are many who wants to get their hands on her.
Yes, and Moraine gives Nynaeve sort of a pep talk, and which Nynaeve needs. She's been through quite a bit. She's on her own. And even in these walls that feel like she's quite protected, now she's just been told that she's going to be staying, in the warders' quarters for her own protection. So even within this beautiful city and the beautiful tower, so to speak, there is it almost feels like Nynaeve might be in some danger. But I think it is very interesting that Moraine introduces again the idea that Nynaeve will possibly be a novice, and Moraine just offers her protection and promises to bring her friends if her friends suddenly appear in the city. But Moraine is very clear and tells Nynaeve that she must stay in the warder's quarters. And I'm curious, Stubble, do you think Nynaeve will stay there as Moraine has asked her to?
Well, as we see later on in the episode, she doesn't really. She takes the opportunity to both go out in the corridor outside and later out into the garden. So, and she's always had her own mind and always think that she knows best about everything. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. And no, she don't take orders well.
Yes. And so she does wander off, as you mentioned, and we're going to talk about that even more as we continue the episode. Ironically, we see Egwene and Perrin do make it as well near to the White Tower with the travelers. But unfortunately, their progression to the White Tower is disrupted by the Hand of the Light. And so we end up with a situation where the Hand of the Light versus the Way of the Leaf. And it really is very interesting because you can clearly see that the Hand of the Light, they feel that they have the upper hand in this fight, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a side that uses violence constantly and the side that never uses violence. So the outcome is fairly predictable. They're going to beat up the thinkers and get their way through violence. But something that I didn't really like in when we met Perrin, it was that he used the word turnip curry, and curry, it made me feel too much like our world. I would much have preferred that he used the word stew or something like that, because I reacted to that. Oh no, couldn't you use another word? But no, that's just small things. But no, the thing shows how that they're, even though they don't use violence, they don't they are not afraid. They don't run away uh, unless they protect their own, even if they don't use violence.
They certainly did stand their ground, and even when knocked around a bit, they continue to stand their ground and form a human chain. And it's at that moment that Perrin and Egwene are led away by one of the travelers, but they are eventually captured by the Hand of the Light. So they weren't able to completely run away from this confrontation. And it's at that moment that, I'm wondering to myself, what will become of them? Because we know how fiercely against the one power the Hand of the Light is. And
Yeah,
ironically, well, let's say, I can't remember the gentleman's, is it Vold?
Eamon Volda.
Volda makes eye contact with Egwene and Perrin, and with Egwene and Perrin, and it just seems so fated that he would do that. But he had seen them before when they were with the party, heading out with Moraine and Tan and Rand and Matt. So he remembered who they were.
Yeah,
And so that was unfortunate that he was able to recognize them. I'm sure Volpe is the type of person who would remember everyone who would stand out. And he used that to his advantage when he saw them with the travelers. So it was almost impossible for Perrin and Egwene to not be noticed. But that certainly was, a worst case scenario, being identified by sight by the Hand of the Light. And so they do get apprehended by them. And I'm, of course, my first fear is that they will be killed by Volpe, because he is so intent upon destroying any sort of magic or usage. And we saw that, of course, when he burned at the stake that yellow Aes Sedai in the previous episode, and also his reaction to Moraine when she said that she was injured, and he'd said, well, find an Aes Sedai, you need an Aes Sedai to heal you. But they're perfectly fine when they're injured to use the magic. But outside of it, I guess, maybe, or having it in general use, they just don't want to see that ever, which I think is very interesting, that in some circumstances they're fine with it, but they're determined to weed out every single bit of the opportunity of an individual using the one power. So they may have scored a point here. And then we see a scene. Yes.
Concerning them chasing down people using the one power, I would say that there are different levels of zeal with different people in the organization.
Mhm.
So Eamon Volda is very zealous in his zeal to to hunt down everyone who can channel or potentially will be an Aes Sedai.
Yes. I mean, even that fear of an innocent person who just happens to be a one power wielder, they're not safe. And you get that sense from Aemon, that he isn't going to let anyone go that he suspects even has a hint of it. And our next scene is back in Tarvalon, and we see that Rand, who is, I guess, in a library. I'm not
Yeah,
quite sure where he is, but
he's reading the Carathian Cycle, which is the prophecies of the dragon. So he's reading that book, and we get an introduction for a new character.
yes, and it's an ogier or ogre. Um,
Ogier.
Rand seems to be aware that they exist, but very shocked that he's seeing an ogre. Can you explain and tell us a little bit more about the Ogiers.
The Ogier is in the books they are a little bit bigger than what the character is here in the TV series because of financial reasons. They didn't have the budget to really make a 8 or 9 foot character to be in the series all the time. But they are many know them for being very good builders. They built the city of Tarvalon long time ago, and they are also known to be very in tune with nature, so to speak. They love nature, and they usually live in their steading, which is a forested area, often with very big trees, and they live within a very small area, which has special properties, so to speak. But sometimes they travel outside their steading to visit usually bigger cities or other steadings, but they don't intermingle with people all that much.
But they seem to be quite knowledgeable, at least in this depiction of them. And we can also see that that knowledge is a benefit.
Yeah,
Earlier on in the series, there was a line that someone had said that one of the most dangerous things, I'm not saying the line right, but it had something to do with a man and a man who has knowledge.
yeah,
And here we see the Ogier seems to have all the knowledge in the world, not just the fact that he's standing in the library, which has that symbolic feeling to it, but he seems to know quite a lot about Rand without even knowing Rand, doesn't he?
yeah. The Ogier live a lot longer than humans. I think that they haven't said that in the TV series yet, but Loyal is around 90 years old, and he's considered almost a teenager by their standards. But they spend a lot of their time writing books and reading books, and you know, also be out in nature. But they have very much knowledge, and yeah, and they're not very. They don't understand the humans why they are so erratic and strange and everything. And he's read about the different kinds of people, and he thinks that Rand is of the Aiel. He's an Aiel man, and we saw an Aiel man in episode 3 in the Matt. He was in the cage. Matt buried him after he'd taken some jewels, but that was an Aiel man. And Tom, the Gleeman, right? He said that you don't see that kind of hair outside the Isle Desert, and Rand has the same type of hair, and so Loyal thought that he was an Isle man, and yeah.
And so then this begs the question: is Rand an Aiel man?
Yeah, that is the question. You just have to watch and find out.
Yes, exactly. And it is intriguing to point it out. And of course, I'm sure other viewers caught on to what they had implied when you saw the man in the cage with the red hair. So that is also very interesting. And I think Rand, the impression that the Ogier made on him was a strong one. However, the implication that Rand may be from there, I don't think Rand accepted what the man was saying or took it to heart too much, knowing very well he's from the Two Rivers. What was interesting was that, like Egwene, Rand is still thinking of her. She's still thinking of him. And, they make a reference about a book that Egwene is very fond of reading.
Yeah.
But this encounter with the Ogier, which is packed with so much information, is disrupted by a special type of procession.
Yeah.
And it's a procession of the Aes Sedai are actually already there. What it is actually the procession of Logain and the procession pretty much of any false dragon that would have been captured by the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, We see the dragon, and the book is called The Adventures or something of Jane Fastrider. So it's a book that everyone has read, more or less. It's an adventure book, but it shows that Egwene has she wants adventure. She wants to see the world, and so it's a reference to that. But the procession outside is the Dragon Reborn, the false Dragon Reborn. At least we think
Yes.
so. Who was gentle, but they have him in a cage and have the Aes Sedai behind him, so they are still doing showing the masses that he's probably not still yet or gentle yet. I mean,
I see, because I wondered about this
yeah,
because, the implication of it really was apparent when the procession passed by Matt and Rand as they were up on a balcony looking down on the procession. We saw Matt, who's still just in agony at this point,
yeah,
make some kind of contact. He has some kind of vision as Logain passes by him, and it's scary. And we can see Logain almost as if he's unaffected at all by the gentling.
yeah. And I know why Logain left in that maniacal manner, but do you know why he left? Why
Do
he
I know why Logain left? You mean?
was laughing? That in
No, I don't know why we saw this terrifying vision, or at least Matt saw a terrifying. I'm assuming Matt is the only one who saw it.
no,
Um,
I don't think it was a vision. It was more like he was in a manic state and laughing. And
Logain was in a manic state.
yeah, and Matt was like, "Oh, that's a madman. I don't want to be a madman," kind
So
of a
are you?
thing.
So then I have to ask this question: is this implying that Matt is falling into insanity and as such can see other men who are in that state? I'm not sure.
I wouldn't say that. I don't want to. I don't want to spoil things, so I can't answer too much. But he was looking at Matt and at Rand, and he was laughing in a maniacal way because he saw something. And you just have to watch and find out what that was.
Well, we certainly noticed it. And later on in the episode, Matt tells Rand something very, very important and something very foreboding. He says to Rand, if either of us, you or I, find ourselves in a state where we're entering madness, similar to what they witnessed seeing Logain march through, the city. If either of us ever find ourselves in a state where we could possibly turn into or be like Logain, we have to stop each other from getting to that state. And I thought that was very interesting
Yeah,
because after hearing the story of the Merriman's, nephew who fell into this state and what happened to him, Matt and Rand are taking things into their own hands. Could
yeah.
could Stubble, could either of them really stop this process in one another?
I think they're saying that kill me before I get that mad or solve it in some way. Because Matt must think that he's going crazy with his mood swings and his, everything that comes from having picked up that dragon. He must think that he's going mad, and maybe he's channeling without knowing. Who knows? So I think he's saying that if I go really bonkers here and start killing people or whatever, that you take care of it and stop me in whatever way that you have to.
So they form this alliance more or less with one another
Yeah,
that, if this happens to either of us, this will be stopped and it won't get to a point where we're in a procession, in a parade, in a cage. And they've already seen one gentleman in a cage. Now this is the second one they're seeing in a cage. and both of them are determined not to end up, in this fate. And I couldn't blame them. I certainly wouldn't want to be in that situation either. And in the same procession, we see Corinna's warder. He actually has her horse in tandem with him, and her boots are still in the stirrups.
Yeah. And the crowd really reacts to that an Aes Sedai has died, because it's very rare that an Aes Sedai dies in the field. They usually dies from old age or something like that, because there hasn't been any huge conflict where the Aes Sedai have been involved in battle in quite a while. It would be the White Coats that have killed off a few, but then you wouldn't get a procession through the city with the warder, because the warder would probably be dead as well. So it's a very rare sight, and people really react to it. And concerning the boots being backwards on the hanging on the saddle or whatever, I don't know if that was in reference to something. I don't recognize that in any way, but maybe that's a sign or something that they keep their boots. I don't know, but the boots were there. I don't know why. Since she was buried with her clothes, otherwise it's strange that her boots were taken back. But maybe that's something that they're doing in the TV series. I don't know.
Yes, and her warder, Corinna's warder, has, her ring, and is determined to return this ring to the tower. And we hear him, her warder, talk about what his next step is going to be. He does return the ring to the tower, and the ring seems like it's destroyed, or I guess maybe placed back in its place of origin. But he says something that is, very interesting, because I guess, or I suspect, that since Corinna was killed, prematurely, she was maybe at the height of her powers, and she was killed, not expecting for her to die at that point, and not expecting himself as a warder to not have, a Aes Sedai, with being bonded to anymore. He says something about to Tan. He says, "First you lose Moraine, and you tell me how easy it is to jump from one woman to the next." And I thought that was sort of like the line of the episode, because we're really seeing the intensity of this connection, and we can also see that this particular warder may not be able to go on without Corinna. And I almost wondered whether or not that was, we're going to be seeing more of that, because we already know that there's a battle, even more of a battle coming up, and there may be more Aes Sedai who don't make it through. And I also wondered whether Tan was going to lose Moraine for some strange reason. And the reason why I kept thinking about that was because of how quickly Nynaeve seemed to connect with Tan. And
I think you mean Lan.
yeah, I'm sorry. I always call him Tan for some reason. And the thing that's odd to me about it is just that there seems to be some connection, which is fine. Like, it's not bad, but Nynaeve seems to be connected to Moraine's warder in some way. Like, there's a strong connection between the two of them. And, we were talking about Nynaeve being more open to being connected to someone and understanding, like the support that you can get from that. And we've also talked about some Aes Sedai who choose not to take on male warders. But we also see Corinna's warder go ahead and destroy the ring by putting it in like a pool, which it seems like it's a soldering pool, and it melts it down. And we finally see a situation where, this particular warder doesn't know what his fate is going to be. And, he's very distressed by this.
Yes, it feels almost like he's lost part of his soul or something, that something very precious has been lost to him in a way. And I think it's excellent acting by, I don't remember the actor's name now, but the actor who portrays the warder. And then concerning the ring, it was very symbolic of, rebirth. You put the ring in and it melts down, and then you take the molten metal and make a new ring, and it was kind of symbolic of the whole, rebirth thing that's in their, what do you call it, philosophy or whatever, in the whole
The
wheel of
wheel.
time concept. Yeah. So yeah, no, it doesn't look good for Step in the Water, and we see later on that that's true.
We do, and we then get introduced to a very traumatic scene, and I do love how they did this scene. It's a scene where we see Egwene and Perrin somewhat traumatized.
But
Egwene,
I just want to mention
yes,
something that was earlier
yes,
there. We have
yes.
all after we have the whole thing with the Lan leaving Stepin. Stepin's going to put the ring into the molten metal. You have a scene with Moraine and Lan where they don't say one word. They just hold hands, and we still get exactly what they're thinking. I don't want to lose you, kind of thing. And I thought that scene was quite good.
It was very touching, and, as I said, to you, I got this ominous feeling, or at least this fear that they may lose one another, and that was very, it was very unsettling. But the reality of the situation is that this could happen to them at any time, and I think that they came to that realization of, you know, this is their lives, and there's no guarantee, they're not promised tomorrow. So, you know,
Yeah. But
it
what do you think? What do you think? Could Nynaeve and Lan have a romantic relationship while Lan is still bonded to Moraine?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I wanted
There's a conflict there, isn't it?
It is a conflict, but after all, remember what we're talking about. Nynaeve may possibly become Moraine's novice and, apprentice, so to speak. And if Moraine doesn't have the same type of relationship with her warder that maybe some of the other Aes Sedai have, it's possible to have this. So I know it's very controversial, but I'm fine with it. Like, I think that, if they have feelings for one another, and, first of all, you're just lucky to even find someone you have feelings for. Let's just be honest about this. You can't just fall in love.
Moraine feels everything Lan feels. So if they're having romantic episodes,
Uh-huh.
there's an connection there.
It's okay. I mean, maybe she's feeling that he's in love with Nynaeve, or that, he has a strong attraction to Nynaeve, and hence, Moraine had a strong attraction to Nynaeve from the beginning anyway. This might
Yeah.
be something that he's picked up from her equally as she's picking up from him, because she was already interested in Nynaeve. She just didn't address Nynaeve in the beginning. She tried to write that in that first episode when she went up to Nynaeve for the, and properly introduced herself, so to speak, telling her that she thinks she's a great wisdom, and is very powerful and has a lot of potential. She didn't have to do that. I mean, by right, she should have done it, as you said in the first episode, but when she realized she hadn't done that, she corrected that. And I think that, she was speaking honestly to Nynaeve about how she felt about her, and her potential. But there would be some irony if Nynaeve, clearly she cares about Moraine's warder. There's no doubt about it. She saved his life.
Yeah.
So if you save someone's life like that, you have to have feelings for them. You don't, with that level of intensity, seeing him like that. I mean, even I felt terrible that he was, potentially killed in that scene. But
Well,
yes, go
yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask you a question, but you were
Yes.
still in your final thoughts there.
Yes. All I was going to say is that um, she literally exploded when she realized that he would possibly die. I mean,
Yeah.
that if that isn't a strong reaction about how you care about someone, I don't know what is. If it were someone else, I don't know if she would have reacted that way. I don't want to play. I guess it is a kind of a dangerous game to say that perhaps if he were not there and wasn't one of the victims, that she may not have responded in the same way, or her emotions may not have gotten to that level of intensity, but clearly she had a strong emotional reaction to seeing him bleeding to death. That was,
Yeah.
she really, it was like an explosion, and she was not going to have it. And I think that that's very interesting, because I'm sure Moraine realized that, and she doesn't fault her for it at all. She's grateful that she saved his life. So there's
Yeah.
that too. I mean,
Yeah.
so
But
yeah.
my question is, if there's a danger coming, whatever it might be, something that will hit everyone, who does Lan stay in front of to protect?
He has to. He's already sworn to protect Moraine, so that's the person that he will protect primarily, even before his own life. And
Yeah.
if he has anything left, he probably will try and protect Nynaeve.
Yeah.
So I think that he has this informal attachment to Nynaeve, and he's probably just grateful that she saved his life. I mean, certainly this is an unspoken fact of the situation, is that I'm sure in his mind, he realizes that there is a very strong bond between he and Nynaeve now because of what she's done for him. So there has to be some sort of I don't think it was an accident that this happened. I think that it was something that was building up between the two of them already
Yeah.
before, that happened. And so, but perhaps the connection, as I said, is more of an indication of not just her fate, but also her connection to Moraine. As you said, she feels everything he does and vice versa. So clearly he senses how deeply Moraine is going to be protective, or wants to be protective of Nynaeve. He knows
Yeah.
that. And
Yes.
and Nynaeve, I think Nynaeve is aware of it, but I don't know whether she can feel it the same way that they feel it, or can feel, the progression of things now is going in a direction that Nynaeve cannot stop. She can't run
Yeah.
away from this anymore. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
I
Should
want
we
her
move?
to go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just wondering, we should move along to
Yes, we
the
should.
next with,
Yes.
yeah.
Because I'll talk about the romance between Nynaeve and the Warder and Moraine all day if you want, but it certainly is kind of nice. And I always love things like this in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I really like it, Stubble. So to me, this is very exciting. So our next scene shows poor Egwene,
Yeah.
kind of being thrown into a white cloak. She's been washed, they've been on the road
It,
for a month.
it's almost a violation of her person in some
It
way.
it is very degrading, and she is devastated. She's probably never even taken her clothes off. Well, maybe only for Rand, but she's probably never taken her clothes off in front of another man before. For all these men to do that, it's particularly for it to be men who are doing it to her, is, very uncomfortable. And you can tell she's crying, she's upset. And then they throw this white cloak on her, almost as if, it's almost as if they defiled her and then they throw a white cloak on her.
I think
Purity.
they see it as they wash her clean and put her in some, you know, clean, innocent, white, very, 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 very white garment. So they wash away all the grit and the dirt from her, so she can be presented to Eamon Valda, without anything.
And
So
we know
she's,
how, I'm
yeah,
sorry, go ahead. We know
no,
how
no,
particular Eamon Valda is, because
yeah,
we've heard him in let's say one or two episodes before talk about how when he wants something presented, how he wants it presented to him. And he doesn't go for people who haven't washed for a month. He doesn't go for any of this stuff. He wants things done in a certain way, and it is very ritualistic the way that they did that to her, and she couldn't resist them. And they didn't care. They didn't care that she was distraught, upset. She felt violated. They just didn't care. So she's incredibly shaken by this, and I felt terrible for her. Um, and she's in this cloak, tied to a chair, and Perrin is pulled in almost like a dog. He's hogtied. It's not even like he's a human being. And it's an equal degradation for him, because this is not Perrin. Perrin is a caring, man, and
Yeah.
this is like such a disgrace to treat him like he's an animal, and he's not an animal, but that's how
No.
he's being treated. He almost looks like he's hogtied and drug around like a piece of livestock. And Valda is just, business as usual as he walks in, very, very prideful, and he does have the upper hand here. He has a lot of power, um, even without the use of magic, which is very interesting, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. He has a lot of. I would say that and I said I maybe don't have as much power as they do in the books because they are a little bit powered down so far, and the White Clocks are convinced that they are right. So their zeal in doing the right thing. I think they don't hesitate to do whatever they need to do to, you know, promote the light in their way, in their perverted way. So yeah, and and Perrin, he's such a gentle, nice guy, and he's treated in such a rough way. It's brutal to see.
It's horrific, as you said. Aemon goes ahead and starts to carve Perrin up and kind of like cause him to bleed. And Perrin, is incredibly strong. He, even despite being put in this position, he's incredibly strong. And um, whilst Eamon presents a scenario between the two of them, each of them have to decide which one of the two will die. We hear this bombshell revelation, which we already knew about, that it happened to Perrin, but he discloses this information to Egwene. And I kind of, they've kind of hinted, although they didn't say this. I mean, they are very close. They grew up with one another, but it almost seems like Perrin at times favors Egwene, and maybe he's a married man, but it seemed as if he had very strong feelings for Egwene. So, that hasn't subsided, regardless of his marital status or even the fact that his wife is died. And while Perrin and Egwene are at this horrible position, where Egwene is being forced, or Valda is saying, "Show me, conjure up the one power," and she's like, "No," and they have this ultimatum of one of them is going to die. And that's when Perrin tells her, his secret.
Yeah. And something that also happens there, when he's carved in the back, you see his eyes, how they change color to almost a golden wolf-like color. So there's something that's being released in him is in this torturing thing. But yeah, there's the classic ultimatum: do what I want, or I kill your friend. Otherwise, you'll die. It's a classical. How you put friends against each other in a
Yes.
such a desperate situation, and he's absolutely cold-blooded. Eamon Volda. He's a perfect villain. You love to hate him.
Yes, and he even implies that perhaps Egwene is an Aes Sedai and that Perrin is her warder. Now, I really thought that was interesting analogy,
Yeah,
because even Aemon could tell that there is some connection between the two of them. That's a strong connection, and that Perrin cares deeply for Egwene, and she cares deeply for him. And perhaps from the observer, from the outside, someone who's seen a lot of Aes Sedai and warders, they may seem like the perfect pair of an
yeah.
Aes Sedai and a warder. What do you think about them in that position?
Yes, they Egwene would be a little young to be an Aes Sedai, perhaps, but otherwise they would make a good pair as a warder and Aes Sedai. And concerning Perrin and Egwene, um, I think there may have been some smoldering interest there, but it was never acted upon. And I have a theory about his wife, that maybe she had a miscarriage or something. That would just explain many of the scenes we see between them, because there's a certain distance between Perrin and his wife in the first episode. But that's just my speculation. That may not be true at all. But yeah, Egwene and Perrin absolutely are very close friends, and they've traveled together for a month now, so they have faced dangers and whatever, and that surely has made them get closer to one another as well.
And I guess that's why Perrin felt that he was able to confide in Egwene at this point where he may be dying. I guess he figures I better tell her, what I've been going through and what exactly has been happening. But he only tells her a fraction of what he's experiencing and what has happened to him, because he doesn't intimate that he has this wound or was injured by the Trollocs, and that somehow, or at least it's implied, that this wound might have some sort of effect over him physically. And as you said, we saw him responding in a way that an ordinary person shouldn't be responding to an injury or to a threat. And, this eye change, is that still a result of the wound that he got from the Trollocs?
Oh, I don't think so.
Mhm.
I mean, you haven't read the first book, but I'm sure there's other people listening who hasn't read the book. But there's, I know, Perrin maybe have some special abilities. Who knows?
And
That has been
so,
that has been latent so far.
and what's interesting about it is that we have already been told that the possibility of the dragon was in these characters, and Perrin is one of those characters as well.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and so there may be other things in store. Now we're seeing things come out of Egwene and Perrin at a time when they're at their most vulnerable. And I almost want to say, or at least I want to at this point just say what happens in the scene, because it does jump away to another part. But I do want to kind of wrap this one up only because of the intensity of the moment that Perrin and Egwene are at right now. This intensity, this level of intensity where neither of them have decided who's going to die. And I almost think that both of them would die willingly at this point. And we do see that. We get a sense of that from the way that Egwene responds to Aemon when he comes into the room again, don't we?
yeah, and both of them have this sense of uh, Perrin is like, I deserve this because I did this horrible thing when I killed my wife and the whole thing. And Egwene probably feels that I can channel. That's why we're here. That's the reason why Perrin is suffering is because of me. So I think both of them feel that the punishment should be on them in some way. Uh, that, I'm not sure if that's their motivation, but that's what I'm reading into it at least.
Well, I have to agree with you on that one. I certainly feel that Egwene feels she's put Perrin in danger, and
Yeah.
that she's responsible for this, and that if she hadn't, been someone who is a potential wisdom, that Perrin wouldn't be in this position. And I don't know whether Perrin feels that he still was supposed to protect Egwene, and that he's failed in this quest or in this promise that he made to himself to keep her safe and free from harm. And now they both find themselves chained up more or less in a very compromising position. And so Eamon Voldet returns into the room, and at the heat of the moment, while he continues to, I guess, I've kind of jumped ahead, because it seems like Egwene tries to conjure up the one power, but cannot do what she'd like to do because she doesn't know how. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. And we see,
Do you mean that she tries to throw like a fireball at him or something?
yes, I think she's trying to do something effectively disabling Eamon, but she's unable to do that. Let's say at this very moment, lack of concentration or whatever it is. She hasn't learned how to do it. But we see,
I read it as she's distracting him while she's burning through the ropes.
oh, that's
That's
interesting.
that's how I read it, but it may be different.
Well, perhaps that is what she's doing. I'm certainly not going to say that isn't the case. I'll rewatch the show, and it's likely that I may have missed that, but she certainly is doing something. She decided at this point that she's going to use the one power, and she does make this attempt. But at the same time, as you said, Perrin seems to have freed himself.
Yeah, and I thought that she burned through his ropes so that he could break free, and then he breaks free, and his growling is very intimidating. I would have liked to see him punch him down and stomp on him or something, because he was the one who was injured, and he should have the retribution towards but instead it's Egwene who has freed herself, probably with the power, and then stabs him in more or less the neck, it seems like.
She really does. And, as far as I'm concerned, she pretty much has killed Aemon. This is it for him. He's not going to recover from this wound. And I think that in this particular case, what's ironic is that they've been hanging out with these travelers for a month. And the travelers talked about how, they go with the leaf and they don't believe in violence. And, even if something happens to them, they'll turn into soil. The leaf turns into a tree. The tree turns into a new leaf. And yet we have a situation where incredible violence is acted upon the two of them. I guess in her particular case, with that defilement of bathing her in an immodest way, and then literally cutting up poor Perrin so that he can bleed to death. And they almost have no choice but to respond to this. And this was something they've been debating in the last episode or so, or in the last few conversations that they've had with the travelers, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like they can't follow the way of the leaf. The way of the leaf sounds really good. It sounds great, but when you're in a situation that Egwene and Perrin was in, then it's very hard not to take it as it comes, as they say with way of leaf. They endure, and if they die, they die, and if they have to run, they run. But if you are in a situation that Egwene and Perrin are in, then it's very easy to say that. It's very easy to say, I won't do anything. But when your life is threatened, or your friend's life is threatened, then you may turn into a violent person.
Yes, and we even saw indications of that in amongst the travelers themselves. When Perrin, notes that there are some travelers that look like they may have had, a bit of a rough time as, they have been, on their journey. But we
Yeah,
certainly, I think what you said hits the nail on the head. I don't think that the traveling life is for them exactly, the way of the leaf. And
no,
so, it'd be interesting to see what happens when they encounter them again, and if and when they encounter them again in this series. But certainly there is that definitive line of them not being able to sort of go down that route. But I really have to say that I loved the sequences in this particular part of the story, because it showed, just one of the many dangers that they were up against, but it also showed that they can handle themselves. And to be honest with you, I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen at the end in this scene, Stubble.
no, no. They have, with the circumstances that were, they handle themselves good, and I think Eamon Valder will survive this and be a recurring villain later on. That's not from the books. That's just me speculating, because he was still moving around on the ground when they cut from him. So we'll see if he's returning. I don't think we'll see him more in this season, but maybe in season 2 he will return, and maybe he will find them again or something like that.
Well, that certainly is a possibility. And at the end of the scene, we are seeing something that we have been witnessing throughout Perrin and Egwene's travels. and that is this sort of wolf, uh, wolf sort of conjuring or calling, where at a moment of need, Perrin seems to have summoned the wolf, or at least what looks like a wolf, and these wolves end up attacking uh, the White Cloths, which is
Yeah.
terrifying, seeing them sort of been pulled apart by wolves. And we've heard so many descriptions of, or at least in literature, being torn apart by wolves. But this
Yeah.
literally is a
Yeah.
situation of the entire clan, or a good portion of the clan, being ripped apart by wolves.
Yeah. So that's yeah. It seems there's some kind of connection there with Perrin and the wolves, but I guess we'll learn more about that later. But
Yes.
yeah,
And it is a strong connection, and by now Egwene must have realized this is maybe the second or the third time when she had said the wolves seem to lead us here, and
yeah,
noticing the wolves following, will they hurt us? And parents saying no, they won't, or indicating that they won't. Egwene must be aware that there's a little bit more to this wolf encounter than
yeah,
coincidence and then meets the eye. So that is also very interesting to see. And so, um, meanwhile, back in Tarvalon, we still see Kirin's warder, and he's no longer the person he was before.
no,
He's knocking on Nynaeve's door and asking for a tonic
yeah,
to calm his nerves. And in actuality, and it's very tricky, he seemed to indicate that he wanted this tonic to calm his nerves. And um,
he wanted to be able to sleep because he couldn't sleep.
right, that's what he
Yeah,
told her that he was going to use it for. And at some point, we see Nynaeve give him the tonic. She graciously gives it to him because she's also concerned about him. And her, as I said before, general her general sense of caring as a wisdom is apparent, but she's grown to really care for these warders. And
yeah,
so she's incredibly sensitive to his plight, and she gives him this potion that's going to help him rest. And Nynaeve decides to leave, or it seems like she leaves the room or the quarters where she's at again, or for a brief time. And that's when she encounters Leandrin,
yeah,
who kind of tells her, well, if you want to explore, the library's this way and the Garden of Wonders is that way. And there's so much to see.
yeah,
And what did you think about that encounter between the two of them there?
yeah. It's Leandrin is a little, it's she tries to lure her in a little bit, and I think the line she says about the garden, that what was it, the persimmons are in season, or what was the,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, the persimmons are in season.
yeah. And I think those flowers or those leaves are yellow and red. So she's a red, and Nynaeve tends to be a healer, and the yellow are healers. So I don't know if it was anything with just that line. I'm maybe analyzing too much here, but also it's like, go to your plants, your herbs, and your your low life over there in the garden, or you can stay here with me. Or there's a lot of ways you can read that line, and I think Leandrin, the actress who plays Leandrin, I think it's Kate Fleetwood. I think she does a marvelous job of making her a little creepy, but also relatable in a way. And yeah, I'm wondering how they're going to take that character later on in the TV series, since they're not following the books, page by page translation. It would be interesting how they develop her, and but I don't think Nynaeve really buys into her speech.
No, Nynaeve is very skeptical of Leandrin, and Leandrin knows this. And however, that's not going to stop Leandrin, because as far as Leandrin is concerned, Leandrin believes that Nynaeve, I'm sorry, yes, Leandrin believes that Nynaeve supports what, her desire to have done the gentling on Logain.
Yeah.
And she believes this because Nynaeve hasn't, said, well, you took matters into your own hands or any sort of thing like that. Nynaeve hasn't said that, but I think that Nynaeve knows that Leandrin needs her. And so
maybe not needs, but certainly wants her to join the Red Arja, and because that would be a strong. She will probably be one of the strongest Aes Sedai in the White Tower when she's finally trained and receives the ring and the shawl, as they say. So she certainly has an interest in Nynaeve, but Nynaeve is not as interested in her, so to speak.
yes, and I think that the fact that the Reds kind of shy away from having male warders is a detriment to Leandrin's ability to coax Nynaeve, even in friendship, over to her side. Because for Nynaeve, I believe, this may not be true, but I believe she senses that the Reds distrust men, and that distrust goes against everything Nynaeve believes in, because Nynaeve doesn't look at the world like that.
No, and sometimes they even hate men. The Reds, they are really not, and Nynaeve, she's not like that. So
No, she's not.
so it will be difficult for them to recruit her to their faction.
And I also like the fact that Nynaeve, as she is walking through the area, she can hear voices in the halls, and she knows very well what that means, because earlier in episode 1, when she was with Egwene in the Two Rivers, they were listening to the wind. And, I think perhaps it's not the same message, but the idea that she can hear something is awry. She can hear the chatter. She can hear something is going on. And of course, the chatter is most likely about her. And the fact that Lilandrin and some of the other Aes Sedai went ahead and performed the gentling charm. But there's a lot of chatter about her as well, because that was, let's say the gentling didn't occur, but Nynaeve had still performed her, pulled the one power to save everyone. If that had just happened alone, that would have been a big deal anyway. It's slightly overshadowed by this procession of a false dragon, which I guess happens quite commonly.
Not commonly, but it happens.
Yes. And so while the two things are concurrent, along with the fact that Karena was killed, everyone is just chatting about Nynaeve, and they're wondering about her, because Nynaeve isn't coming there because she wants to be an Aes Sedai. That's the interesting part about this. She's there because she wants to find her friends. And I think that this makes it even more interesting. What do you mean she's here and she doesn't want to become an Aes Sedai? Didn't she just use the one power to save, 10 people? How could she not want to become an Aes? We don't understand this. And so she must be somewhat of a bit of a great source of fascination for the other Aes Sedai, trying to figure out, what her next move will be. I think the only person who isn't maybe confused by it all is Moraine, because she understands where Nynaeve comes from traveling to her village and understanding that she's a great wisdom. And I think that no matter what Nynaeve decides to do, Moraine will support her regardless, but maybe not the other Aes Sedai.
No, we'll see what happens to her. And something I should mention is that in the books there's certainly a lot of unreliable narrators.
Yes.
That is, that people think they know what's going on, but maybe they always don't. And so I think maybe some of that will play into it. It has nothing to do with this scene in particular, but it will be interesting to see how much of that will play into the TV series as well. How because the Aes Sedai are certain that they are right, but maybe they aren't always right, and maybe they are wrong about the most important thing. Who knows?
Yes, and it would be heartbreaking. Of course, for me, that would mean maybe they're wrong about Logain. And it would be heartbreaking if that were the case, or if they were wrong about any other of the potential people who they think might be the Dragon Reborn. So, what if it was the first guy, you know?
Yeah.
But, um, you know, we're back now to the scene where the Ogier tells Rand that he knows where Nynaeve is. And while Matt is in this terrible state of sickness and is haunted, essentially what happens is that the Ogier brings Nynaeve to them. And what I really like is that Rand kind of talks about Matt's ability to channel and how worrisome he is that Moraine or any of the other Aes Sedai will do what they did to Matt in similar fashion as they did to Logain. And of course, that would be the first thing you would be thinking about. And so because of this, Nynaeve says she's going to treat Matt and not bring Matt's issues to the attention of the Aes Sedai. And I think she's doing the right thing, because I think it would be terrible at this point if she excuse me, if she brought Matt to the Aes Sedai. You and I both know what would happen to Matt.
Yeah, if he can channel, they will probably think that he can channel, and treat him quite roughly, perhaps. But yeah, I think Nynaeve wants to treat him herself, because she doesn't take orders and she doesn't take help if she doesn't have to, and maybe even if she needs to, she doesn't take help, because we will fix this ourselves. That's her mentality. And yeah.
I'm sorry. And she's perfectly capable of doing quite a lot on her own. This is what she does for a living. She is a wisdom and a healer in her village, and probably has healed Matt and Rand before, or let's just say Matt in this case. She's probably treated him before. So this is something that's not a surprise. And of course, Leandrin has a confrontation with Moraine about Nynaeve. And as we suspected, Moraine tells Lograine in no uncertain terms that Nynaeve kind of likes being around these warders and enjoys the company of men. So, you know, maybe she should back off. And I really liked that implication, because that's, you know, it was clear from the beginning that that was the case, and quite ironic, because as we said before, she was a wisdom who had chosen a life away from men, and now you know her path is very different. And so kind of at the conclusion of this episode, you know, Tan is with Lorraine's, excuse me,
Lan.
Corinna's, I'm sorry?
Lan, you mean Lan?
Yes. Why do I keep calling him Tan? I actually have it written down, Lan. Lan is with Corinna's warder, and what happens is that they have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it turns out that there's another Aes Sedai who's interested in him. Of course, she's interested in him. He's a very good warder. It seems like a nice guy. And they're talking about if there's a way to release the bond that you have with someone. And that was something that, you know, he didn't want to lose that bond, and he wanted the pain to continue, because it was almost like that was something he was using to hold on to the memory, the bond that he had with Alana.
Yeah.
And so essentially what happens is he, even though Alana is offering to take him on as a warder, and I said that incorrectly before, but Alana is another Aes Sedai who would like to bring, you know, Corinna's warder into her fold.
Because really, the green are the only ones who bonds more than one warders, and so Moraine couldn't bond him because she's a blue. She can only have one warder.
Right, and I guess maybe he contemplated, wouldn't it have been great if he could have bonded with Moraine, but honestly, I don't think he wants to bond with anyone else.
No.
And, incidentally, he uses that potion that he got from Nynaeve and drugs Lan.
Yeah.
And ends up taking his own life. And, I think we all saw the writing on the wall on this one, didn't we?
Yeah, we were just waiting for it to happen, more or less the whole episode. And I know that there was, I know other channels who have, recommend people who are depressed to, because this is it's a suicide at the end, and it's a trigger for some people, and so, and it's a very sad episode in many and somber in many respects, and it's a, if you watch these episodes in one sitting, eventually all 8 episodes, I think this will be a, because episode 4 was such a extreme action filled episode, so I think it will have a nice flow to have this a little bit more somber tone. And he kills himself after he's drugged Lan, the step in the Karen's water, and then there's a funeral scene. So we have bookends with the funeral scenes. You start with the funeral for Karenni and the other people who died at the battle, and then you end with the funeral for Stepin. So it's a little poetic in a way to have it bookended with that. But yeah, and it's a little bit, Lan is given the role of representing everyone's grief at the funeral, and it's a little bit out of character for him to show emotions so openly. He's very stoic, at least in the books. But here's this a closed. It's just a few people, and a few. But there's not like a public performance or anything. It's a very closed set, and he's fulfilling a role. And there we see him taking on the grief of the rest of the warders and the people in the room, and we see the connection between him and Moraine in a way there, don't we?
We do. Of course, she is also mourning what has happened. It's a very sad event, and as you said, it's a suicide. And anyone who's watching this, if you're in that state, please go and get help. Reach out to someone. Because this is something that we don't like to see someone take their own life. And I think that, as you said, each of them experience each other's feelings. And, it was already a bit of a somber moment with Corinne being killed. And now it becomes even more somber and more sad when her warder takes his life. This is the worst case scenario, I think, for all of them. And to top it off, now they have to worry about the fact that the Amerlins is going to be coming back to make them answer for gentling Logain and perhaps gentling whomever else Leandrin may have done this to. And so that also creates a very somber mood. And even the idea of tossing around the notion of taking the seat from someone, I think I didn't even know this was something that was going to happen, but perhaps that was Leandrin's motive altogether, is to assume more power as an Aes Sedai.
It's not the normal thing, the Amelins are usually for life, but if there's is a certain reason, if they are misusing the power, they can be challenged by someone. So maybe they're referring to that, or maybe just to, the TV series are doing things a little bit different. So who knows how this will unfold.
And it is a concern because they all seem concerned about it. They seem very concerned that that she is making a special trip to come into town for this particular, not necessarily to for Logain's trial. You know,
Yeah,
what would be the norm? That's not why she's coming into town. She's coming into town to deal with the fact that things are happening that should not be happening.
yeah,
And they even imply that Moraine may want to change her position in the Aes Sedai hierarchy. Why
yeah.
would she want to do that?
Um, I don't want to spoil things, but it's connected to how they are ranked is connected to mm, it's connected to the power levels, so to speak. Just so I'm spoiling things here. The
It's
stronger an
okay.
Aes Sedai,
This is a spoiler review.
yeah, the stronger an Aes Sedai is in the power, the more authority she has. So since Moraine is one of the stronger Aes Sedai, she has the potential authority to challenge the Amelin on certain question, maybe even challenge her authority. But it would take a lot for her to do that. It's not something that's done regularly in any way. It's very, very, very rare. There can be, criticisms and so on, but very rare that they would depose someone from the seat or something like that.
And so even
Yeah,
the implication of it would be considered like an uprising or somewhat revolutionary.
yeah,
And I think that that's very interesting too. At this very moment, all this stuff sort of coming to a culmination together
yeah,
at such a critical moment, when we're hoping that um, you know, the four of them, or let's say, will come together and be reunited here in the city. There's so many other things that are going on politically wise. Like you said, the episode was had two funerals, one in the beginning and one at the end, more or less.
yeah,
But it also has this political challenge to um I guess to maybe Moraine, who in the beginning warns Nynaeve about what can happen in the tower. And now at the end of the episode, the implication that Moraine herself may be in a position to be a strong political player.
yeah,
So overall, I think that this episode really did have so much in it.
yeah,
While it's true that the action was very different type of action, we saw that there's a lot at stake, and that it's a possibility that we may have a change in the main seat of the Aes Sedai in the future.
yes. And what do you know what the next episode is called?
No, do you?
Yes, it's called The Flame of Travalon, which is what it's in reference to the Amelin, to the leader of the Aes Sedai. And do you know who plays her?
No, I don't.
Sophie Okonedo. And she won. No, she was nominated for an Oscar for Hotel Rwanda.
Yes, I've
So
seen that film maybe 20 years ago, because I know it came out quite some time ago. Oh, wait, that's the actress I was telling you about that I like a lot.
yeah,
I'm a big
so
fan of hers. I just realized who she was.
yeah,
Um, I'm
so
a
there will
huge
probably
fan
some
of hers.
scenes between her and Rosamund Pike. So the two Oscar-nominated actresses. It will be interesting.
It will be interesting. I'm a huge fan of Sophie's, and I've watched her through the years in many roles throughout, her career. She was also in a television series called Flack recently, which was on, I think, on Hulu or one of the streaming stations, which was the
I
most
didn't see
recent
it.
thing.
I didn't
No,
see
you
it.
may not have seen it. It's about sort of like an agency that fixes up mistakes for celebrities and things like that. But
Okay.
um, she's a great actress, and I've always been a fan of her work. And I'm glad that she's playing the Amerlin in this series, and I'm looking forward to seeing her, uh, put out, or what should I say, use her authority in this particular case to figure out how she's going to handle all this stuff that's going on that should not be happening in this order. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a great episode, Stubble. I can't wait till Friday or Thursday or whatever time they release this to see the next episode. And thank you. Did you have any other thoughts about the episode that you wanted to cover or wanted to comment about?
No, I'll just say that even though I like this episode quite a lot, it was number 4. Episode 4 is still my favorite, and this is maybe on second or third place so far. But we'll see. I've heard that Brandon Sanderson, who finished the book series with the 3 last books, he has been consulting on the scripts, and he said that episode 6 is the best script, according to him.
Oh my gosh. So I'm so excited, Stubble. This is going to be...
Or his favorite script.
Oh, his favorite. Well,
Yeah.
I am very excited, and I have a feeling it's going to be fantastic. I'm so looking forward to it, and I wanted to thank you again for joining me to review the Wheel of Time television series. This is episode 5. This is a spoiler review, and thank you so much for taking the time out to spend with me to do this review today.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching, thank you for watching this episode. As you know, we're going to continue to review the entire series with the next episode, as Stubble mentioned, episode 6 coming up in a few days. And for those of you, I hope you enjoy it and continue to watch the series on the channel. And remember, everybody, please be kind.